It is the biggest store in the world. For over half a century, Walmart has been more than a retailer. It's been a promise of always low prices, endless choice, and the efficiency of a globalized world delivered to every main street in America. But in 2025, that promise shattered. When faced with a president's tariff ultimatum, America's largest employer made a choice that triggered an economic civil war, igniting a firestorm of inflation and supply chain chaos. How did a fight over who pays for tariffs bring the American economy to its breaking point? To understand the collision, you first have to understand the machine. The Walmart model was the crowning achievement of 20th century capitalism. It perfected the just-in-time global supply chain, a complex dance connecting factories in Asia to cash registers in Arkansas with breathtaking efficiency. This system, built on decades of open trade and cheap labor, allowed Walmart to deliver on its core promise: always low prices. American consumers reaped the benefits, enjoying a standard of living subsidized by a hyper-efficient, globalized world. For decades, the relationship between Washington and corporate America was symbiotic. Government policies fostered free trade, and companies like Walmart delivered low inflation and consumer happiness. It was a stable, profitable, and seemingly unbreakable pact. But the seeds of conflict were sown long before the crisis erupted. The America First agenda of the first Trump administration challenged the very foundation of this globalist model. The rhetoric shifted from celebrating free trade to condemning it as a bad deal that had hollowed out American manufacturing. Sporadic tariffs and trade disputes created a new and dangerous element for global businesses: political risk. Corporations like Walmart, Nike, and Conagra, once lauded for their efficiency, were now implicitly framed as unpatriotic for their reliance on foreign production. The tension between political nationalism and economic globalism began to simmer. Businesses started quietly exploring ways to diversify their supply chains away from China. But moving a machine the size of Walmart's is like trying to turn an aircraft carrier in a bathtub. It was clear that a fundamental conflict was brewing, a clash between a political agenda aimed at reversing globalization and a corporate world built entirely upon it. The simmering tension erupted into a full-blown economic inferno on April 2nd, 2025. Invoking the vast powers of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, President Trump unleashed what the White House dramatically branded the Liberation Day tariffs. This was not a nuanced policy adjustment, it was a sledgehammer. The order imposed a sweeping 10% tariff on nearly all goods imported into the United States from any country. But it didn't stop there. For China, the primary target, the tariff was an astronomical 145%, later dialed back to a still crippling 30% after initial market shock. The move was designed to be overwhelming, a form of economic shock therapy intended to force a radical and immediate realignment of global trade. The publicly stated goal was to punish nations with trade surpluses and, most importantly, to compel American corporations like Walmart to abandon their foreign factories and bring manufacturing jobs back home. It was the ultimate expression of the America First ideology, weaponizing access to the US consumer market to achieve political ends. This strategy deliberately ignored decades of economic consensus, which posits that tariffs, especially broad ones, are not a penalty on foreign exporters, but a tax on domestic importers, who then pass that cost down to consumers. For the administration, rising prices were acceptable collateral damage in a larger war to reclaim what they saw as lost national sovereignty and industrial might. The shockwave was instantaneous and global. The intricate, just-in-time supply chain, the very engine of the modern retail economy, seized up. As the Washington Post reported, corporations across the country scrambled to set up war rooms to deal with the fallout. The financial markets recoiled in horror. ETFs tracking the retail and transportation sectors saw record outflows, reminiscent of the 2008 financial crisis. The VIX index, Wall Street's fear gauge, spiked, and the cost to insure Walmart's own debt rose sharply, putting a cloud over its plans to finance supply chain expansions. In a matter of days, a single executive order had plunged the world's largest economy and its most dominant retailer into a state of profound and costly uncertainty. For Walmart, a company whose entire business model is predicated on low costs and predictability, the tariffs were an existential threat. The first sign of the damage came in its first quarter earnings report, which captured just the initial weeks of the tariff regime. The results were grim, with profits sinking. As reported by Reuters and the AP, the company issued a stark warning. It could not absorb the massive new costs and would have no choice but to raise prices. This public admission was seen as a direct challenge to the president's narrative. The White House wanted corporations to swallow the cost. Walmart was announcing it would pass the bill to the American people. The confrontation escalated dramatically on May 17th. Enraged that Walmart was publicly blaming his policy for price hikes, President Trump took to social media with a direct command, stating that Walmart and other retailers should eat the tariffs. It was an unprecedented public feud, a sitting president declaring war on the nation's largest private employer and a bellwether for the entire U.S. economy. Amid this firestorm, Walmart made another move. As first reported by Reuters, the company announced plans to cut 1,500 senior positions within its global technology division. While the company, and reporting by the Wall Street Journal, framed it as a long-planned move to simplify the organization, the timing was impossible to ignore. It was seen by many as the first concrete step in a painful corporate belt tightening forced by the new economic reality. The message was clear. If the government was going to increase its costs, it would be forced to cut costs elsewhere, and jobs would be on the line. But the most significant response was happening behind the scenes. Facing an unpredictable trade environment, Walmart was forced to abandon its Q2 profit forecast, a move that sent shivers down Wall Street's spine. CEO Doug McMillon confirmed the pressure, stating that while they would mitigate price increases where possible, they could not absorb all of it. It was a quiet but firm rebuttal to the president's command. The battle lines were drawn. The situation descended into a chaotic and damaging stalemate. The president refused to back down, believing that public pressure would force Walmart to capitulate and absorb the costs. Walmart, facing a catastrophic blow to its low-margin business model, held its ground, systematically passing the new costs on to consumers. Caught in the middle was the American public and the entire economic ecosystem. As reported by the Financial Times, the price of everything from food and household goods to electronics and children's car seats began to climb. The standoff created a crisis of confidence. Businesses could no longer plan for the future. Investment stalled. The war rooms at major companies shifted from contingency planning to active damage control, freezing hiring and shelving expansion plans. The core promise of economic stability, a pact between the government and its largest economic players, had been broken. The question was no longer who would pay for the tariffs. It was how much damage would be done to the entire economy before the standoff ended. This was not just a fight between a president and a CEO. It was a contagion that infected the entire American economy. The most immediate symptom was inflation. By June, as reported by the Associated Press, the Consumer Price Index, CPI, had jumped 2.7% year over year, a clear signal that the tariff costs were hitting Main Street. Economists estimated that American consumers were ultimately bearing between 70% and 100% of the tariff burden. The pain was felt by every family buying groceries, every small business stocking its inventory. The crisis radiated outward, crippling the global logistics network. The cost of shipping goods from Asia exploded. Supply chains, once marvels of efficiency, fractured. This forced a painful reckoning for countless American businesses who, like Walmart, had built their models on global trade. They were now trapped, facing higher costs, delayed shipments, and deep uncertainty. The impact rippled across the border into Canada. The Canadian economy is deeply intertwined with that of the US, relying on the same trans-Pacific shipping lanes and integrated logistics networks. When the cost to ship a container to North America skyrockets, it doesn't matter if its final destination is Denver or Toronto. The price goes up for everyone. Canadian retailers face the same rising input costs. Canadian families began to see prices for imported goods creep up on their store shelves. The key difference was the source of the problem. For Canada, the economic pain was an external shockwave emanating from Washington. For the US, the wound was self-inflicted. The crisis served as a stark lesson for Ottawa and Canadian businesses about the profound risks of being so closely tethered to a politically volatile trade partner, accelerating conversations about diversifying and building more resilient, independent supply chains. For Walmart, survival required a radical and painful reinvention. Faced with an unstable trading environment, the company embarked on a massive, multi-pronged strategy to re-engineer its colossal supply chain. First was the geographic pivot. The company accelerated its multi-year plan to reduce its reliance on China, desperately trying to shift sourcing to other countries like Vietnam and India. But this was no easy fix. These nations lacked the sheer scale and infrastructure of China, leading to significant delays and bottlenecks. The Made in China sticker couldn't be replaced overnight. Second was a massive bet on automation and domestic production. Walmart began pouring billions into building new factories and distribution centers on US soil in places like Arkansas and Ohio. This wasn't a patriotic response to the president's call, but a cold, calculated business decision to reduce its vulnerability to future tariffs and international shipping chaos. The centerpiece of this strategy was a huge investment in automation, partnering with companies like Symbotic to deploy advanced AI and robotic systems like the Link 16 to make their domestic operations hyper-efficient. This strategy represents a fundamental retreat from the globalist model that made it a titan. The always low prices promise was now secondary to a new imperative: always available. It is a bitter lesson in the consequences of trade warfare, a costly adaptation that will reshape the company and the American retail landscape for decades to come. And so, North America stands at a crossroads it never anticipated. The showdown between a president and a corporate titan exposed the fragility of the global system that has supplied our way of life for a generation. A political agenda designed to restore American industry instead triggered a domestic crisis, disrupting communities and raising prices for everyone. Walmart, the icon of global capitalism, was forced into a painful retreat, with its long-term strategy now focused on automation and costly domestic investments. The trust between government and industry, once a given, lies in ruins. In the race to define the future, will North America win together, or will both sides lose trying to go it alone? Are you American or Canadian? Share your story and your perspective in the comments below.